You're bankrupt, David. They took everything from you. Every last dollar. Your parents, your family, they've been bleeding you dry for years. I used to believe I understood what betrayal felt like. I thought I'd seen enough of life to know where the knives would come from. But nothing prepared me for the moment when my lawyer's voice cracked through the phone, harsh and unrelenting. You're bankrupt, David. They took everything from you. Every last dollar. Your parents, your family, they've been bleeding you dry for years. At first, I laughed. Not out loud, but somewhere deep inside. In that absurd way your mind protects itself when reality feels impossible. My parents? My 6 brothers and sisters? The people I grew up protecting, providing for, sacrificing everything for? Thieves. I stared out the floor-to-ceiling windows of my Manhattan apartment, where the city stretched below like a living, breathing promise. This view was my reward for 2 decades of grinding. Teaching myself to code in a cramped dorm room, building apps at night, while working 2 jobs, clawing my way up until I became one of the most sought-after freelance programmers in New York. I wasn't born rich. Hell, I wasn't even born lucky. I was the oldest of 7 kids in a tiny house where the fridge was always empty and the power went out more often than it stayed on. But I fought for every inch of my life. I bought my way out of poverty with sleepless nights and bleeding fingers on a keyboard. And when I made it, when the checks started coming, when the zeros multiplied, I gave it all back to them. I bought my mother a car. Then my father wanted a Tesla. I paid for my brother's college. Then another brother's MBA. I rented an apartment for my sister and her boyfriend, though he already came from money. I covered summer vacations, ski trips, shopping sprees, mortgage payments, medical bills, birthday parties, anniversaries, everything. And every time, I told myself the same thing: they're my family. It's my responsibility. Somewhere along the way, I stopped realizing I wasn't helping them anymore. I was funding them. I'd spoiled them so much they didn't even pretend to work. I thought I was buying love. But love you pay for is never really love, is it? The lawyer's words wouldn't stop echoing in my head. David, you have 2 choices. Sell the apartment in Manhattan or the fleet of Rolls-Royces. That was when it hit me like a punch to the ribs. I'd been living for them, not for me. The warning signs had been there all along. When I once forgot to pay my parents' utilities for a single month, my mother called, furious, threatening not to invite me to Thanksgiving. My father left me a voicemail that said, "We raised you. You owe us." Owe them. Always owe them. When I met Jill, everything changed. She didn't care about my money. She had her own career, her own dreams, her own independence. For the first time in my life, I was with someone who wanted me, not what I could give. I decided to pull the plug on my endless financing of the family. No more cars. No more vacations. No more guilt checks. And surprisingly, they took it well, almost too well. Our relationship seemed to improve. They called more. They sounded supportive. I should have known better. The plan was perfect. Jill and I were going to have a wedding at one of the most luxurious hotels in Los Angeles. My family was ecstatic, bragging to me about the expensive gifts they were preparing, about the famous people they'd convinced to come. For the first time in years, I thought, maybe I was wrong. Maybe we are a real family after all. Then, a week before the wedding, my phone rang again. It was my lawyer. His voice trembled this time. "David, something's wrong with your accounts. Someone's been stealing from you. For 2 years. At first, I thought it was hackers. Some faceless criminals on the dark web. But no, it was worse. So much worse. My entire family had been siphoning money behind my back. They'd duplicated the emergency card I'd given my mother, the one I kept for unexpected hospital bills, accidents, real needs. They'd been bleeding me dry little by little, month after month, until $200,000 was gone. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at the floor as the city lights glimmered outside my window, thinking, this is it. This is the moment when something inside me dies. At first, I thought about canceling the wedding. How could I stand there, smiling, pretending everything was okay? But then I thought of Jill. She was the only real thing in my life, the one person who never wanted anything from me but my love. So I made a decision. I banned my entire family from my wedding. And then I did something insane. I walked into a homeless shelter in downtown LA, where they were serving free dinners, and I invited everyone there to my wedding instead. They came. All of them. We gave them the best rooms in the hotel. We bought them tailored suits and dresses, let them shower, gave them dignity back for just one night. And you know what? Sitting at my own wedding, surrounded by people who had nothing, I felt more at peace than I ever had with my so-called family. For the first time in my life, I was free. But freedom has a cost. I cut all ties with my family after that. No calls, no gifts, no vacations, nothing. Months later, I learned from the news that one of my brothers had been arrested for robbing a bank. My sister had twins, but I only found out because we accidentally showed up at the same church one Sunday. When Jill suggested naming one of our daughters after my mother or sister, I refused. The wounds were too deep. Family, I realized, isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. And sometimes, strangers will stand by you more than those who share your DNA. I thought I was done with betrayals. I thought the worst was behind me. But I was wrong. Because the day my older sister finally came to visit me in the hospice, the only one of the 7 who never asked me for money, who never guilted me, who kept her distance out of respect, she brought a truth so heavy it cracked the foundation of my entire life. David, she said, her voice quiet but steady, we're not related. You're not Mom's son. You were adopted. Our mother's younger cousin, Diana, she gave birth to you. I froze. 40 years old, and I was just finding out I wasn't who I thought I was. And worse, Diana had disappeared. When my sister left that day, I sat in silence for hours, staring at the beige hospice ceiling while the truth kept gnawing at me like rust on steel. I'm not their son. I'm not the oldest of 7. I don't belong to them at all. You'd think I'd feel relief. After all, these people had drained me dry, treated me like an ATM with a pulse. But instead, I felt hollow. Because if they weren't truly mine, then who was? Where did I come from? Who was I? That night, I told Jill everything. She listened without interrupting, holding my hand the way she always did when the world fell apart around me. When I finished, she said just one thing. Then let's find her. The next morning, I asked my sister for everything she had. The documents, the birth certificate, any scraps of information about this Diana. There wasn't much. Just a faded hospital form from 1984 with a scrawled signature, Diana Carter. No father's name. No address. I spent days, no, weeks, digging through old records from my hospice bed, with Jill running errands and making phone calls I couldn't. Every lead was a dead end. Every number disconnected. Every government office couldn't disclose that information. It felt hopeless until Jill found a rehab center in Arizona with records of a Diana Carter, admitted twice in the late 90s for heroin addiction. 2 near-fatal overdoses. 2 discharges. Then, nothing. Should we call them? Jill asked, holding her phone like it was a bomb. Yes, I whispered. Call them. An hour later, we learned she'd checked out 18 years ago. No one had seen her since. But there was one clue, an old forwarding address in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I sent letters there, begging for contact. Nothing. Weeks passed. Then one evening, my hospice nurse wheeled me into the garden to get some fresh air. The sun was dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of blood and gold. My phone buzzed in my lap. A voice on the other end rasped, low and shaky. Is this David Carter? I froze. Yes, I said cautiously. I got your letter. A pause. A soft inhale. This is Diana. My heart stopped. I didn't know what to say. There were 1,000 things I wanted to scream. Why did you leave me? Where have you been? Who am I? But all that came out was, hi, Mom. Silence. Then I heard her crying. Soft, broken sobs, the kind that carry decades of regret. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. David, I don't deserve to call myself your mother. Then start by telling me why. I said, my voice sharper than I intended. And she told me. About being 16, alone, addicted, terrified. About giving birth in a hospital room she barely remembers, signing papers she didn't read. About Catherine, the woman I'd called my mother my whole life, stepping in to help her, promising to take care of me until she got clean. Except Diana never did. She vanished into streets and alleys, into needles and cheap motels. By the time she was ready to come back for me, Catherine had moved us to another city. I looked for you, David, she said between choked breaths. I swear I did. But Catherine made sure you'd never find me. She told me you deserved better than me. And she was right. I wanted to hate her. God, I wanted to. But I couldn't. Because as broken as she was, she'd never taken a dime from me. never pretended to love me for what I could give her. Unlike Catherine, she hadn't stolen everything. But the story wasn't over. Diana told me something else, something that chilled my blood. David, she said, lowering her voice, you need to know. Catherine lied about a lot more than just me. I wasn't the only one she kept secrets from. What do you mean? She wasn't just using you for money. She was hiding money. Hundreds of thousands. Maybe more. There's an account in your name. I signed papers back then, papers I didn't understand. She used your identity, David. Everything you think you've lost, it might still be out there. I felt my breath hitch. My heart slammed against my ribs. Because if that was true, my entire financial ruin wasn't just my family draining me. It was something deeper, darker. And then Diana whispered something that made my skin crawl. Don't trust anyone, David. Not even me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Jill sat beside me, holding my hand while I stared at the ceiling, trying to piece it all together. If Diana was right, Catherine hadn't just stolen from me. She'd built an entire life on lies, using my name, my future, my identity. And if that was true, then someone else out there knew it too. Someone who didn't want me digging. Because 2 days later, I received a letter under my hospice door. No return address. No signature. Just 6 words, written in perfect block letters. Stop looking, or you'll regret it. The letter sat on my lap for hours. The words burned into my mind like a brand. Stop looking, or you'll regret it. 6 words. No signature. No explanation. But it was enough to make me feel like I was standing on thin ice, one wrong move away from plunging into something I couldn't escape. I showed the letter to Jill. She frowned, her hands trembling slightly as she turned it over, checking for fingerprints like a detective in some TV drama. David, she said softly, this isn't just about family anymore. This feels dangerous. Dangerous. That wasn't supposed to be my life. I was a programmer, for God's sake. My wars were fought in code, not in dark alleys and anonymous threats. But here I was, 40 years old, broke, dying in a hospice, and somehow in the middle of a mystery that didn't make sense. I decided to confront Catherine. It had been months since I'd last spoken to her. Months since I banned her from my wedding, since I cut her and the others out like a surgeon removing rot. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to break her walls, to make her confess. But when she opened the door, I almost didn't recognize her. Her perfect hair, always dyed, always styled, was gray now unkempt. Her face, once a carefully curated mask of youth, sagged under the weight of exhaustion. But her eyes were the same. Cold. Calculating. David, she said, forcing a smile that didn't touch her lips. You look thin. I wheeled myself past her without asking. I wasn't here for pleasantries. Why didn't you tell me I was adopted? I asked, cutting straight through the silence. She froze. Just for a second. But it was enough. I didn't think it mattered, she said finally, her voice too calm. We raised you. We loved you. You are my son. I laughed bitterly. Loved me? You drained me dry, Catherine. You used me. And now I find out you used my name too. Diana told me everything. At the mention of Diana, her mask cracked. You spoke to her? She hissed, venom lacing every word. Yes, I said, leaning forward. And she told me about the account. The one you opened in my name. The one with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Where is it? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned away, her hands trembling as she reached for a glass of water on the counter. You shouldn't be digging, David, she whispered finally. You have no idea what you're getting into. That should have scared me. But instead, it enraged me. All my life, I said, my voice shaking. I thought I was taking care of you. Turns out, you were taking care of yourself. You used me, Catherine. And now I'm broke. I'm dying. And you're standing here telling me I shouldn't ask questions? She turned slowly, her expression softening into something almost sad. You think I'm the villain, she said quietly. But you don't know who you're really dealing with. And then she said something that made my stomach twist. It wasn't just me, David. There are people bigger than me. People you don't want to cross. That money, it isn't yours anymore. It hasn't been for a long time. I left her house that night, shaking with anger and confusion. Bigger than her. What the hell did that even mean? Back at the hospice, Jill sat beside me as I told her everything. She tried to stay calm, but I could see the fear creeping into her eyes. David, she whispered, this sounds dangerous. Maybe you should stop. Stop? I snapped, louder than I intended. Jill, my entire life has been a lie. My family used me. My mother isn't my mother. I don't even know who I am. And now there's money, my money, out there somewhere. No, I'm not stopping. She took my hand, squeezing it hard, grounding me. Then we do this together, she said. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Catherine's words in my head. There are people bigger than me. What people? And why did they care about me? Around 3 a.m., I rolled to the window. The hospice parking lot below was mostly empty. But under a flickering streetlight, a dark sedan sat idling. Its headlights were off. I stood there, staring for what felt like hours, until finally it drove away. The next morning, I asked the nurse about it. She frowned. David, we don't allow visitors after midnight. There shouldn't have been anyone there. 2 days later, Jill's car was broken into. Nothing was stolen. Not her wallet, not the laptop, not even the cash in the glove compartment. Just one thing. The manila folder with all of Diana's documents. I called Diana in a panic, but her number had been disconnected. I tried the rehab center again, no record of where she'd gone. It was as if she'd vanished. That night, Jill found another letter under our door. This one wasn't a warning. It was a demand. Meet me. Midnight. Pier 19. Come alone. I don't know why, but I went. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was insanity. Jill begged me not to, but I couldn't let it go. When I arrived, the pier was quiet, waves lapping against the wooden posts, fog rolling in like ghosts from the sea. A single figure stood at the edge, hood pulled low, face hidden in shadow. You shouldn't have come, the voice said. Deep. Male. Calm. Who are you? I asked, my voice echoing in the mist. The figure stepped closer, and in the pale moonlight, I saw his face and felt the ground shift beneath me. Because I knew him. I'd seen him once before. At my wedding. Sitting in the back row. Smiling. The stranger stepped closer, his shoes scraping against the damp wood of the pier. Fog clung to him like a shroud, blurring his edges, making him look less like a man and more like a ghost. I knew that face. I'd seen him at my wedding, months ago, sitting in the very back row while Jill and I exchanged vows. He didn't clap, didn't smile, didn't speak to anyone. I'd assumed he was a friend of the homeless guests I'd invited. Just another forgotten soul swept into our celebration. But now, standing here in the cold mist, I knew better. Who the hell are you? I demanded, my voice shaking despite myself. He didn't answer right away. He looked past me, scanning the shadows behind me, making sure I was alone. Then he stepped forward and said, quietly, almost gently, "My name's Michael Carter." I froze. Carter, I repeated, the name tasting foreign and familiar at the same time. You have my last name. Because I'm your uncle, he said. Your mother's brother. The wind howled off the ocean, rattling the boards beneath us. I gripped the wheels of my chair tighter, grounding myself, trying to process what he'd just said. My uncle. Michael nodded slowly. His face was worn, weathered by time and things he wouldn't yet speak of. His eyes darted nervously, as though expecting someone to emerge from the mist at any second. You shouldn't be digging, David, he said, echoing Catherine's warning. This isn't just about family drama. It's bigger than you think. Catherine's involved, yes, but there are others. People you don't want to cross. Then start talking. I snapped, anger bubbling to the surface. Because right now, I don't know who to trust. Catherine lied to me my whole life. Diana disappeared. And you, I gestured at him. You show up out of nowhere, knowing everything, watching my wedding from the shadows like some damn stalker. So if you're family, prove it. He hesitated, then pulled something from his coat pocket, a worn, folded photo. He handed it to me. It was a hospital room. A young girl, maybe 16, maybe younger, cradled a newborn baby. Her face was pale, her hair tangled, her expression dazed and terrified. But her eyes, I knew those eyes. They were mine. That's Diana, Michael said softly. That's the day you were born. I was there. I traced the edges of the photo with my thumb, my throat tight. For the first time in my life, I was looking at the moment I came into the world. And it was nothing like the story Catherine had told me growing up. She gave you to Catherine because she thought you'd be safe, Michael continued. She didn't know Catherine had connections. Connections to what? I asked. Michael leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. To a laundering network, he said. For years, Catherine's been moving dirty money through clean accounts. Yours was one of them. That emergency card you gave her? It wasn't just for groceries and vacations. It was a front. Millions passed through accounts under your name, David. Millions. The world tilted beneath me. You're telling me, I said slowly, that Catherine used me as a money mule? Michael nodded grimly. And now you're a liability. That's why Diana warned you. That's why you got those letters. And that's why I'm here, to keep you alive. I stared at him, my mind spinning. Alive? I echoed. I'm dying anyway, Michael. Hospice, remember? You think that matters to them? He shot back, his voice sharp. They don't care if you live or die. What they care about is silence. If they think you'll expose them, you won't make it to the end of the year. You won't even make it to the end of the week. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. Then help me, I said finally. Help me find Diana. Help me get my name back. Help me end this. Michael hesitated, glancing toward the dark water as if weighing some unspoken risk. Finally, he nodded. Tomorrow, he said, we'll meet here again. I'll bring proof, documents, accounts, names. But you need to promise me something, David. What? He stepped closer, his face inches from mine, his voice low and deadly serious. Don't tell anyone. Not Jill. Not your sister. No one. Until you know who's really on your side. I returned to the hospice that night, every nerve buzzing. Jill was asleep when I came in, her hand curled loosely around a book on her chest. I watched her for a moment, wanting to tell her everything. About Michael, about the network, about the danger tightening like a noose around my neck. But I didn't. For the first time since I'd met her, I kept a secret. The next evening, I rolled myself back to the pier under a sky heavy with storm clouds. The air smelled of salt and electricity, the kind that crawls under your skin and whispers that something terrible is coming. Michael wasn't there. I waited an hour. 2. The fog thickened, swallowing the world around me. Finally, I reached for my phone to call him, and that's when I saw it. Floating against the wooden post at the end of the pier. A single black glove, soaked, drifting in the current. And beneath it, tangled in the pier's rope ladder, something pale. Something that looked like a hand. The pale hand bobbed in the current like a gruesome buoy, tethered by the rope ladder. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my fingers dug into the armrests of my chair, and the sound of the waves drowned everything else. Michael. I wheeled closer, my heart hammering. The water slapped against the pier, cold and merciless. The glove drifted further out, as though mocking me, before sinking beneath the black surface. I reached for my phone, hands trembling, and dialed 911. My voice cracked as I tried to explain. A man, missing, maybe dead, maybe in the water. By the time the police arrived, the hand was gone. Swept away. The officers searched the area, their flashlights slicing through fog and darkness, but there was nothing. No body. No glove. No Michael. Are you sure you saw someone? One officer asked, his tone edging toward skepticism. It's late. Visibility's bad. Could have been debris. I wanted to scream at him, but my voice failed me. So I nodded mutely, clutching the armrests of my chair until my knuckles whitened. They left with no answers. Just another hole in a story full of holes. When I returned to the hospice, Jill was awake, pacing the room. She stopped when she saw me, her face pale. David, where were you? I woke up and you were gone. She cut herself off, shaking her head. Never mind. What happened? I wanted to tell her everything. About Michael. About the laundering network. About Catherine's lies. But Michael's warning rang in my head. Don't tell anyone. Not Jill. No one. So I lied. I just needed air, I said. Got stuck watching the ocean. Her eyes searched mine, looking for cracks. For a moment, I thought she'd press me. But instead, she just nodded, slowly, and kissed my forehead. The next morning, I received an envelope. Slipped under my door. No postage, no name. Inside were photographs. Blurry, grainy shots of me at the pier. Me waiting. Me looking at the water. Someone had been watching me. But it wasn't the photos that chill me to the bone. It was the note scrawled on the back. Michael won't be coming back. Stop digging, or your wife is next. I hid the photos before Jill saw them. My hands shook as I shoved them into the drawer of my nightstand. The words burned in my skull like fire. Your wife is next. I realized then that this wasn't just about me anymore. Whoever these people were, they knew where I lived. They knew Jill. They were watching. I had two choices: back down and protect her, or keep digging and risk everything. And for reasons I still can't explain, maybe stubbornness, maybe desperation, maybe just the dying man's need for truth, I chose to keep digging. I called the rehab center again, pressed harder, bribed an administrator with the last of my savings. Finally, a crack appeared in the wall of silence. Diana hadn't disappeared completely. She'd been checked into a halfway house in Santa Fe 10 years ago. She left after 3 months. No forwarding address. But one name kept appearing in the records. A sponsor. A woman who signed for her check-ins. Her name was Lydia Navarro. Jill and I drove to Santa Fe. It was my first trip outside the hospice in months, and the world felt too wide, too fast. The desert stretched out in endless waves of sand and rock, the sky pressing down heavy and merciless. We found Lydia in a small adobe house at the edge of town. She was in her 60s now, with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel. When I asked about Diana, she tensed immediately. "Why are you looking for her?" she asked. "Because she's my mother," I said. Her eyes softened just slightly. She invited us inside. Lydia poured coffee into chipped mugs and lit a cigarette. Smoke curled through the room as she spoke. "Diana, she tried," Lydia said. "She really did. But the ghosts were too strong. She relapsed more times than I can count. She wanted to find you, though. Always talked about you. Said she left you with Catherine because Catherine promised you'd have a better life." "Where is she now?" I asked, leaning forward. Lydia hesitated, took a long drag from her cigarette. "She disappeared about 6 years ago. Last I heard, she was in El Paso, working at a diner. But David," she exhaled smoke slowly, "if you're looking for answers, you'd better be ready. Because Diana wasn't just running from her addiction. She was running from the same people you are." My blood ran cold. "The laundering network?" I asked. Lydia nodded grimly. "Catherine didn't just help her cousin by taking you in. She made a deal. Diana owed money. Dangerous money. Catherine took you in as leverage. And you," she jabbed her cigarette toward me, "you became the perfect shield. A clean name. A fresh start. They built an empire through you, David. And if you're still alive, it's because they're not finished using you." The room spun. My pulse roared in my ears. All my life, I thought I was the provider, the caretaker, the man holding his family together. But I was never in control. I was the product, the mask, the shield. And now that I knew the truth, they were coming to erase me. That night, back at the hospice, Jill sat beside me in silence. I could feel her fear, heavy and unspoken, like a shadow between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "David, what if we just stopped? What if we ran? We could leave this all behind. Start fresh somewhere they can't find us." I looked at her, at the woman who'd stood by me through everything, and I wanted to say yes. God, I wanted to. But then my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. El Paso. Midnight. Diner off Route 62. Come alone if you want to see her. The diner on Route 62 was a coffin of flickering neon, buzzing faintly under the desert stars. Midnight hung heavy, silent, except for the low hum of distant traffic and the occasional howl of wind. I sat in my car across the street, hands locked on the steering wheel, staring at the chipped red door. My chest ached from the climb out of the hospice. My lungs wheezed. My body begged me to turn back. But I couldn't. I needed to know. Inside, the place smelled of burnt coffee and fryer oil. A jukebox in the corner played something slow and mournful, barely audible. And there she was, Diana. Older, frilier, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes hollowed by years I couldn't account for. She sat in a booth by the window, her hands folded tight, a chipped mug in front of her. When she looked up and saw me, her lips trembled. "David," she whispered. "My God, you look just like your father." I froze. "My father," I managed. "You mean Michael?" She shook her head slowly. "No, not Michael." My throat went dry. "Then who?" She reached into her purse and slid a photograph across the table. It was an old Polaroid, edges frayed, colors faded. A young man with sharp features and a crooked smile stood beside her, his arm around her waist. Behind them was a roadside bar I didn't recognize. "That's him," she said softly. "Your real father." I turned the photo over. On the back, scrawled in blue ink, D+A, forever. July 4th, 1983. The initial was an M. It was A. Before I could speak, the door creaked open behind me. I turned and froze. Catherine stood there, Her hair was pinned back, her expression unreadable, but her presence filled the room like smoke. "David," she said gently, as though nothing were out of place. "Come home." I gripped the photo until my knuckles ached. "Home?" I spat. "After everything? After laundering money through my name? After lying about Michael? After—" I held up the Polaroid, shaking. "This?" She sighed. "You were never supposed to find out," she said. "It was cleaner if you didn't know." Diana reached for my hand, her fingers trembling. "Don't listen to her," she whispered. "She's dangerous, David." Catherine's hand moved faster than I could track. A gun appeared, glinting under the buzzing neon. "Stop talking, Diana," she said coldly. My breath caught. "Put it down," I rasped. "Catherine, for God's sake." "You don't understand," she snapped, her composure cracking for the first time. "Everything I did, everything, was to protect you." "Protect me?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "You used me. You built your empire on my name, my credit, my goddamn life. You think you'd be alive without me?" Her voice trembled, just slightly. "Diana owed them everything. They were going to kill her. And you. I made a deal, David. You became my son on paper, so they'd leave you alone. I kept you safe. For decades." Something inside me twisted. Was it true? Was Catherine my savior, or my captor? I searched Diana's face, but her eyes were wet and distant, as if she already knew this night wouldn't end well. "David," she whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have fought harder. But she's right about one thing. They were going to take you. They still might." The bell above the diner door jingled again. 3 men walked in. Dark suits. No expressions. No hesitation. The laundering network had arrived. "Time's up," one of them said, his voice flat. Catherine stood, placing herself between me and them. "You don't touch him," she hissed. The man smiled faintly. "You think you still have leverage? Michael's gone. Diana's a liability. And him," he nodded toward me, "he's just collateral now." Before I could move, Catherine raised her gun and fired. The sound split the air like lightning. 1 man dropped. The other 2 dove for cover. Shouts erupted, dishes shattered, the jukebox wailed on obliviously. Jill's face flashed in my mind. Her laugh, her touch, the quiet mornings we shared. And I realized, with brutal clarity, that if I didn't end this now, none of us would survive. I don't remember moving. Only the weight of the gun when Catherine shoved it into my hand. My aim shook, but somehow I fired. Once. Twice. And then it was over. 2 bodies on the diner floor. The third one fled into the night. Catherine leaned against the counter, blood blooming across her shoulder. Diana sobbed silently into her hands. I stood there, shaking, the gun slipping from my grasp. In the silence that followed, Catherine whispered, "It's done. You're free now." But I knew better. Freedom doesn't come from killing 3 men in a diner. Freedom doesn't come from truth, either. Because now I knew everything. About Diana, about Catherine, about the empire they'd built through me. And that knowledge was a curse. 2 weeks later, Catherine fell from the balcony of her Manhattan apartment. The papers called it an accident. I didn't believe it. Diana vanished again. No trace. No calls. No forwarding address. I returned to the hospice. Jill tried to pretend life was normal, but sometimes I'd catch her watching the windows at night, afraid of headlights slowing outside. I never told her about the Polaroid. About my real father. About July 4th, 1983. Some truths are too heavy to share. Now, at the end of everything, I lie in my hospice bed and watch the ceiling fan spin. The air smells faintly of antiseptic and salt from the sea breeze outside. I close my eyes, and I see that photograph. The man with the crooked smile. The promise scrawled in blue ink. D+A, forever. Forever didn't last. But the ghosts did.